8 months, Sarah! You were doing this for 8 months and you said nothing to me? I provide everything for this family. Everything. And you sat in this house, my house, and hid things from me?
I sat in this house and disappeared. For 6 years, and you never noticed.
You gave me no reason to. How much? How much have you even made from this year?
Look at it yourself.
This is real.
Yes, it is.
I thought I was taking care of you.
You were taking care of a version of me that was convenient for you. The rest of me was disappearing. And you never came looking.
I see that now.
I almost forgot I was here. Almost.
She was not supposed to end up here. That is the thing nobody tells you about a life that slowly gets smaller around you. It does not happen with a big noise. It does not knock on your door and announce itself. It does not show up one morning and say, today is the day you stop being you. It happens the way a slow leak ruins a wall. You do not see it happening. You only see the damage after it has already gone too deep. She was not a sad woman. She was not a woman who cried every day or complained loudly or made people around her feel her pain. She was the kind of woman who woke up early, made breakfast, sorted the children, kept the house, smiled when her husband came home, and then, late at night, when everyone was finally asleep, she would sit very still and wonder where she went. Because somewhere between the wedding and the children and the cooking and the waiting, she had stopped being a person. She had become a function, a shadow of herself. And the most frightening part, nobody noticed. Not even her. This is the story of what happens when a woman finally does. Before we dive in, please do something for me. Drop your city in the comment. I read every one and it blows my mind how far these stories travel. While you're there, take 2 seconds to tap that like button and subscribe. New videos drop every week and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. These ain't just stories for fun. They show how real people think, real choices, real pain, hidden battles. And who knows, your comment might be the exact thing someone scrolling needs to feel less alone. So yeah, take 3 seconds, tap the like button, subscribe and drop your city below. Now let's get into this. Let me tell you what really happened to Sarah. Sarah had been 26 years old when she married Dan. 26, with a business degree, a notebook full of plans, and the kind of hope that makes a young woman walk tall even when the road ahead is not clear. She had wanted to run her own small business, something in supply and distribution, nothing too big at first, just enough to be hers. She had written it all down in that notebook. Pages and pages of it, ideas, plans, names she liked for the business. She was not just dreaming, she was preparing. She had done her research, she was ready. Then she met Dan. Then she loved Dan. Then, because she loved him, she told herself the notebook could wait, just until the wedding settled, just until they found their rhythm as husband and wife. She was still young. The dream was patient. It would wait for her. The dream waited. Sarah kept waiting for the right time to go back to it. The right time never came. What came instead, about 9 months after the wedding, was a pregnancy, and with it, the first quiet shift in her life that felt like love but walked like a gate closing. She could not start a business while her body was doing this huge, beautiful, exhausting thing. Of course she could not. So she waited. She would go back to the notebook after the baby came, after she rested, after life settled a little. The baby came. Then the sleepless nights. Then the feeding and the crying and the doctor's visits and the learning curve of keeping a tiny human being alive. Then, before she had fully come up for air, she was pregnant again. The second pregnancy hit her harder than the first. Her body was already tired, her mind was already stretched. The first child was now a busy toddler with energy that seemed to come from somewhere science could not explain. The second baby arrived, and Sarah looked up one afternoon genuinely surprised to find that almost 3 years had passed since she had touched that notebook. She found it at the bottom of a storage box while cleaning the bedroom one Saturday. She sat on the floor and turned the pages slowly. Her own handwriting looked strange to her, like it belonged to someone else, someone younger, someone who did not know what was coming. Sarah sat there on the floor for a long time. Then she closed the notebook. Then she stood up and went to the kitchen because the baby was crying and the toddler needed a snack and dinner would not make itself. She did not put the notebook back in the box. She put it on the side table next to the bed, close, within reach. That small move was the first refusal, even though she didn't know it yet. Everyone agreed that Sarah needed help in the house. The toddler was now in school during the day, which helped a little, but the younger one, though he slept more than his brother ever did and was generally easier to manage, still needed someone around during the hours Sarah was trying to hold everything together. The apartment was a full-time job on its own. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, shopping, school runs in the morning, school pickup in the afternoon, baths at night, and somewhere in between all of that, being a wife. Dan agreed that she needed help, the way he agreed to most things that did not require much from him right away, quickly, easily, and without really following through. But the help came. The first girl was 19, quiet. She seemed responsible. She lasted 6 weeks before Sarah noticed that things were going missing. Not big things, milk powder, small amounts of money from the kitchen envelope, provisions that finished too fast. Sarah had sat the girl down and spoken to her calmly. The girl cried. Then she denied it. Then she confessed. Dan sent her home that same evening efficiently, like he handled household problems, like fixing something mechanical rather than dealing with a person. "We will find another one," he said. And they did. The second girl was older and came with good words from the people who referred her. She was calm, she was clean, she seemed to know what she was doing. Sarah felt for the first time in a long time that something was going to work out. She let herself breathe a little. She even opened the notebook one evening while the girl handled the children's bath time. Then, not even 3 months after the girl arrived, their neighbor Rose came to the door one afternoon with the careful face of a woman carrying difficult news. She told Sarah quietly and without drama that she had noticed the new house girl and the security man at the gate had become very close, too close, and that she had reason to believe, from things she had seen and heard, that the girl was pregnant. Sarah stood at the door and listened to Rose talk and felt something cold move through her chest. She called the girl that same evening and asked her directly. The girl did not deny it. She was 10 weeks on. She had known for a while. She had said nothing. Sarah did not shout. She was too tired to shout. She sat down on the kitchen chair and looked at the wall for a moment. Then she told the girl to pack her things. She called the security company the next morning and had the security gate man replaced before Dan even knew the full story. When she told Dan that same evening what had happened, he shook his head and made a sound of irritation and said, "These people, honestly." Then he picked up his phone and continued what he was doing. Sarah looked at him. She waited to see if there was more. There was what? She went back to the kitchen. The third girl came 3 weeks later and stayed 2 months. She was not dishonest. She was not careless. She was simply unwell in ways that only showed themselves slowly in small moments that added up over time into something that frightened Sarah in a quiet way before it frightened her in a loud way. The morning Sarah found her standing over the baby's cot at 2 in the morning, completely still, saying nothing, just standing there. Sarah made a decision she never went back on. No more. No more strangers in this house. No more opening her doors to people who brought their own storms inside and left them behind when they went. She would do it alone. She had always been doing most of it alone anyway. She would simply stop pretending otherwise. But the price of that decision lived in her body every single day. It lived in the darkness under her eyes that had stopped being temporary. It lived in the way she walked before her alarm, already running through the day's tasks before she had taken one full breath of morning air. It lived in her shoulders that carried a tightness she had stopped noticing, the way you stop noticing a piece of furniture that has always been in the same corner. She was 30 years old. She was tired in a way she could not explain to anyone, and the notebook on the side table had not been opened in months. She had tried to talk to Dan about it more times than she could count now, and in more ways than she had known she was capable of. The first time she was direct. She sat him down on a Sunday evening when the children were asleep and the apartment was quiet, and she told him plainly that she needed to work, that she needed something that was hers, that she had carried a dream into this marriage and it was still alive inside her, barely, but alive, and she was afraid that if she did not do something about it soon, it would die completely, and she would never get it back. Dan listened. He was good at listening in a way that looked like understanding, but was not quite that. When she finished, he took her hand and said, "Sarah, I take care of this family. You don't need to put pressure on yourself." She looked at him. "This is not about pressure. It is about who I am. You are my wife. You are theirs, mother. Is that not a thing?" The question sat on her like something heavy, not because he meant it badly. He asked it like a real question, like he genuinely wanted to know why it was not enough. And that, somehow, was harder to deal with than if he had simply been unkind. He had given her a life and could not understand why the person inside that life was struggling to breathe inside it. The second time, she brought something specific. A part-time role she had seen advertised that she could do from home during the baby's nap time. She had looked into it properly. She had answers ready for his questions. She presented it to him calmly. His question was not about the role. Who is running this place? Is it a man in charge? Dan. I don't like the idea of my wife taking instructions from another man every day, calling him sir, going back and forth with him. No. It is how work works. That is what a job is. Not for my wife. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked away. The third time, she brought something smaller. She asked him to help her start something of her own. She had ideas. She always had ideas. She just needed a little money to start and his support and his belief in her. Just that.
He had smiled, warmly, kindly. "I will sort something out for you. Just give me a little time." She gave him time, months of it. He mentioned the business idea twice in all those months, vaguely, like someone mentioning a plan they have already quietly decided not to follow through on. When she brought it up again, his face carried mild surprise, as if the conversation had taken pins between different people. "These things take time, Sarah. You know how it is." She nodded. She went back to the kitchen. But something was changing inside her. In the hours when the house was quiet and she lay awake in the dark, something underneath all the patience and the waiting was turning. Something small and firm. Something that sounded, if she listened carefully, very much like the voice of the 26-year-old who used to fill that notebook at night because she was too excited to sleep. That voice had not gone anywhere. It had just been waiting for her to get still enough to hear it again. She started trying to find work online, alone, without telling Dan, because she already knew what he would say, and she had run out of the energy required to absorb another version of no. It was much harder than she expected. The internet was full of things that looked like opportunities until you got close to them and they fell apart. She tried freelance work and her applications went nowhere. She tried one online program that turned out to be more complicated than it looked on the outside. She tried transcription work, listening to audio recordings and typing out what was said, and worked steadily for 2 months, only to find the total amount she had earned in that time was enough to buy a bag of rice and very little else. She tried things and failed at them. She tried other things and failed at those too. She counted the attempts in the back of the notebook. Not to remind herself of defeat, but to remind herself that she was still moving, still trying, still there. 17 things. She tried 17 different things. Every failure cost her something that was harder to name than money. It cost her a little more of the belief that she could actually do this. There were nights she lay in bed after a failed attempt and thought quietly and without drama that maybe he was right. Maybe she could not do anything beyond this apartment. Maybe the woman in that notebook had been a younger, more hopeful version of herself who did not know yet how things actually turned out. She never let Dan see the attempts. He would have found a way to make each one mean something about her limitations rather than about the difficulty of the thing she was trying to do. She kept the notebook. She kept trying. The call from her friend Joy came on a Wednesday afternoon in March. Lagos was hot the way it gets in March. Heavy, close, the kind of heat that makes everything feel like effort.
Sarah was sitting on the kitchen floor. Not because anything dramatic had happened. She had bent down to get something from a low cupboard and simply not stood back up because the floor was cool, and cool was the closest thing to rest available to her at that moment. The younger child was asleep. The older one was at school. She had maybe 20 minutes before the next thing needed doing. Her phone rang. Joy. "Talk to me," Joy said before Sarah had finished saying hello. Joy had always been able to hear things in Sarah's voice that other people missed. "I am just tired." "Not normal tired?" "No," Sarah said, "not normal tired." "Tell me." And she did. Sitting on the kitchen floor with her back against the cupboard, she told Joy everything. The 17 attempts, the failures, Dan's comfortable certainty that she did not need to do anything beyond the house helps and the disasters each one had brought, the notebook on the side table she couldn't bring herself to throw away or open, the feeling of waking up every morning and spending a moment, just a moment, before the day found her trying to locate somewhere inside herself the woman who had once believed she was going somewhere. Joy was quiet for a long time when Sarah stopped talking. Then she said, "I am coming to see you this week." "Joy, you really don't need to." "Sarah, listen to me. I have something real to show you. Not one of those things. Something I have been doing myself for almost a year now. I should have told you months ago. I'm sorry I did not." Her voice went lower, the way voices do when what they are carrying actually matters. "It's a remote job, international. You work a set number of hours in any 24 hours, morning, night, whenever you can find the time, and the pay is in foreign currency." Sarah pressed her hand flat on the cool kitchen floor. She needed something solid under her. "Come," she said. "Come this week." Joy came on a Friday morning. She sat at Sarah's dining table with her laptop and her patients and walked her through everything. The company, the role, how to apply, what the interview looked like, what the work itself involved. She stayed until the afternoon. When she was leaving, standing at the front door with her bag on her shoulder, she turned back and looked at Sarah with an expression that was warm but also serious. "Send the application today. Not this weekend, today. Promise me." "I promise." "And think carefully before you tell Dan. I know how your first move will be to tell him straight away. But just think first, because you know how he can be with these things. Get the job first, let it be real first, then decide." Sarah thought about it. She submitted the application that same afternoon in the narrow window between picking up her son from school and starting dinner. Her heart was beating fast, not the anxious kind of fast, the other kind, the kind that comes when something you stopped hoping for starts to feel possible again. 3 weeks later, she got the reply. She was sitting in the car outside the school gate waiting for the afternoon bell when the email came through. She read it once, then again, then a third time slowly, making sure she was reading what she thought she was reading. She had the job. Her hands were shaking. She put her phone face down on her lap and looked through the windscreen at the school gate and breathed very carefully. Parents around her were talking, cars were moving, a woman nearby was arguing with someone on her phone. The world was doing all its usual things. And Sarah sat in the middle of it all and felt something she had not felt in so long it took her a moment to recognize it. She felt like herself. She did not tell Dan that night. She made dinner, she bathed the children, she sat with Dan in the living room while he watched the news, and she looked at the side of his face and thought about Joy's words and thought about all the times she had brought him something fragile and watched it get smaller in his hands. She wasn't willing to do that with this one, not this one. She would wait until it was solid, until it was real, until it was already hers in a way that did not require his permission to remain so. She waited until he was asleep. Then she took her phone to the dining table, put on the old sweater she kept on the kitchen chair, and logged in for the first time. It was 11:40 at night. The apartment was breathing slowly around her. Outside Lagos was doing what it always does, being loud even in the quiet hours, alive even when it should be resting. Sarah put her earphones in. She opened the work dashboard and began. The first month tested her in every way a person can be tested without breaking. She worked at night when everyone was asleep and during the day whenever a window opened. The younger child, thankfully, was an easy DB. He slept long and deeply, and when he was awake, he was content with small things, a toy, a soft sound, her voice nearby. Those long nap times became her most valuable hours. She learned to move from mother to worker and back in seconds. She learned to close the laptop and smooth her face into the right expression before Dan rounded a corner. She learned to save her work constantly because the baby's wake time respected no deadline. She was tired in layers, the kind of tired that sits in your bones and stays there regardless of how many hours you sleep, because sleep itself had become a broken, interrupted thing. She once fell asleep on the bathroom floor in the morning, back against the side of the tub, head resting on her own shoulder, 9 minutes on a bathroom floor. It was the longest unbroken rest she had managed in 3 days. But underneath that tiredness was something she had no other word for except alive. Every night she sat at that table, she felt it. The work made sense to her. Her mind, which had been running on household tasks and baby logistics for years, finally had something that was fully worthy of it. She was sharp. She was fast. She solved problems quickly and correctly. Her supervisor, a woman based far away who communicated in clear, direct emails, sent her a note at the end of the month saying her work was among the best on the team. Sarah read that email so many times that the screen dimmed from inactivity. She opened the bank account on a Thursday morning while the baby was sleeping. She walked into the branch near the children's school in her everyday dress with her everyday bag, and she opened an account in her name only, her own number, her own signature. She walked out with a small card that she tucked into the inner lining of her bag, the one Dan never touched because it was full of house receipts and children's paracetamol and things that had nothing to do with him.
The first payment came 3 days later. She was in the kitchen when the alert came through. She looked at the figure. It was real. It was in her account. She had earned it. She stood at the kitchen counter for a moment. Then she went back to stirring the pot on the stove. She did not say a word to Dan. Dan's business had been showing trouble for months, but Dan was the kind of man who dealt with trouble by acting like it was not quite trouble yet, which is the kind of response that turns small trouble into very large trouble in a fairly short time. His company handled procurement and supply contracts. It had done well for years, well enough that his identity was built almost entirely around it. Around being the man who provided, the man who handled everything, the man whose wife stayed home because his work was enough for all of them. When the business started struggling, he did not know who he was without the confidence of it. 2 big clients stopped paying on time, a third pulled out of a contract without much warning. The money he was spending to run the business kept going out while less was coming in. He started bringing a particular kind of quietness home with him in the evenings. Not the comfortable quietness of a man at rest, but the tight, pressed quietness of a man holding something difficult very carefully. Sarah noticed. She noticed everything about him. Not because she was watching for problems, but because 6 years of close living teaches a person to read another person without trying. She said nothing. She watched. She managed the house budget with even more care than usual, finding small savings in places he would never think to look, stretching what he gave her further than he should have been able to go. Then one morning at breakfast, he told her, in a light voice that was working hard to sound lighter than it felt, that he was going to reduce the monthly house money, just temporarily, just to help him manage things on the business side. Sarah put her cup down. She looked at him across the table, past the children who were eating and paying no attention to the adults. She told him without raising her voice that the money he gave her for the house was already not enough, that she was already managing it down to the last naira before the month ended, that cutting it would not save his business, it would just mean the children went without things children should not go without. Dan looked at her with an expression she had not seen in a while, like he was seeing someone who he had expected to agree with him and had found someone instead with a position of their own. He did not cut the money, but the pressure between them was building. It built quietly, the way heat builds in a room with the windows closed. Something was going to have to open. He started watching her more, not in a loving way, in a trying to figure something out way. He noticed her reading glasses she had started wearing at the table at night. He noticed her earphones. He noticed that her phone had a particular angle when she was using it that was not the casual angle of someone with nothing to hide. One evening he asked, with a small smile, what she was always doing on her phone these days. Working, she said. He laughed, a short, easy laugh, the laugh of a man who finds something mildly charming or not serious. You and this your online work, he said, shaking his head, and picked up the television remote. Sarah looked at the side of his face for a moment. Then she stood up and went to the kitchen. She worked until 2 a.m. that night. The night it all came open was a Tuesday. Dan's evening meeting had ended earlier than planned. He did not call ahead. Why would he? Sarah had no schedule he would need to check. He arrived home at 6:30 to an apartment that was quiet and clean but had nothing cooking. He set his bag down and walked through to the main room. Sarah was at the dining table. She was in her old grey sweater, the comfortable one she had owned since before the children. Her reading glasses were on, the laptop was open in front of her, and her notebook was beside it with a pen resting in the middle. Her earphones were around her neck. She was typing, pausing, checking something in the notebook, typing again. Her lips moved slightly, the way they do when a person is counting or working something out in their head. She did not hear him come in. He stood in the space between the corridor and the dining area and watched her, just for a moment. And in that moment, he saw something on her face that stopped him in a way he was not prepared for. He had not seen that expression on her in years. It was focus, real, deep focus, the kind of that belonged to a person who is somewhere important inside their own mind and doesn't need anyone's permission to be there. She looked up and saw him. For 1 second before either of them spoke, they looked at each other, fully. The way people look at each other when the familiar surface has slipped and what is underneath is suddenly visible. You are back early, she said. She did not close the laptop. He walked in slowly. His eyes moved from the laptop to the notebook to her glasses to her face. What are you doing? Working. Sarah. He said her name the way people say a word they are testing the weight of. I can't see you are working. Working on what? A remote job. I have been doing it for months. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. He put his hands flat on the table. She recognized that gesture. She had seen it many times. She waited. How many months? He asked. 8. He was quiet for a moment. 8 months. He repeated it not as a question but as a thing he was placing in front of himself to look at. And you did not tell me. I told you I was working online. You said as long as it did not disturb the house. It has not disturbed the house. That is not what I mean, and you know it. Then tell me clearly what you mean, Dan, please. He stood up. He walked to the window. Outside, the estate was doing its usual evening things. Children playing in the compound, a car horn somewhere, the sound of a generator starting up 2 houses down. I told you I did not want you working under another man, he said to the window. I work for a company that is not even in this country. There is no man standing over me. There is a laptop and a task and a payment when the task is done. You hid it from me. She looked at his back. I protected it from you, she said. Those are not the same thing. He turned around. Every time I came to you with something I needed, every time I told you I needed something of my own, every time I asked you to help me find a way, you told me you were enough. You told me the money you bring is enough. You told me to focus on the children and trust you and wait. I waited, Dan. I waited and nothing came. And I started to feel like I was disappearing inside this house. Like every day a small piece of me was going somewhere I could not get back. So yes, I found a way. And I kept it to myself because the only safe place for something that matters to me has been inside myself for a very long time. The room was very quiet. Dan looked at her. She did not look away. She was not trembling. She was not on the edge of tears. She was just there, present, real. The full version of her standing right there in the dining room in an old grey sweater with reading glasses on. And something about the wholeness of her in that moment, the unapologetic, undiminished realness of her, seemed to be doing something to him that he did not have language for yet. He said, "Show me. Show me everything." She turned the laptop toward him. He looked at the work platform. The hours logged, the tasks completed, the months of consistent, careful, professional output. He scrolled slowly. He looked at her profile on the platform, her ratings, her completed projects, the review left by her supervisor that said her accuracy and reliability were exceptional. Then she picked up her phone. She opened her bank app. She placed the phone on the table between them. He looked at the balance. He looked at it for a very long time. 8 months. That number had been in the account. 8 months of midnight work and 4-hour nights and bathroom floor naps and hiding screens and protecting something precious in the only way available to her. The figure on that screen was not a small figure. It was the figure of a woman who had taken a door that was only slightly open and walked through it with everything she had. Dan put the phone down on the table. He didn't push it back to her. He put it down in the space between them, like something that now belonged to the conversation rather than to either of them alone. He looked at his hands. She watched him understand. She watched it move across his face slowly, like the light moves across a room when clouds shift. She watched him understand that the woman he had told to wait, to trust him, to focus on the children, that woman had been quietly carrying herself and building something real in the dark, while he was busy being certain he knew what was best for her. She watched him understand that the house was not running on his provision alone, that behind every budget that somehow stretched, every problem that somehow resolved, every stability he had taken for granted, she had been there, doing the invisible work that made the visible life possible. He watched him understand that while he was walking through his life with confidence, she had been holding the floor beneath his feet. He opened his mouth. He closed it again. He looked at the table. Then he looked up at her and said quietly, "I owe you an apology, not just for tonight." Sarah looked at him for a moment. "I know," she said. "I thought providing meant protecting. I thought if I took care of the money, you were taken care of. I did not think. I did not see you. Not properly. I was so sure I knew what this family needed that I never stopped to ask what you needed. And that was wrong. It was wrong for a long time, and I'm sorry." The room was still very quiet. Outside, in the estate, it had settled into its nighttime sounds. Inside, something was different from how it had been this morning. Not fixed. Some things take longer than one conversation to fix. Not perfect. Perfection was never what she had asked for, but different. Something had been seen that could not go back to being unseen. Something had been said that had needed to be said for years and had finally found its way into the open air of the room where they lived. Sarah reached across the table and closed the laptop gently. "The account has enough to deal with the problem in the business," she said. "I can transfer what is needed. We can sort out the rest together." He looked at her. "Together." "Yes," she said. "That is how it should have been the whole time." He nodded, not the quick, easy nod of a man who has heard what he wanted to hear, a slower nod, the nod of a man who has understood something that will take time to fully settle into, but who has understood it in the right place, not just in his head, but somewhere deeper. Sarah stood up from the table. She picked up her phone and her notebook and her pen. She took the earphones from around her neck and set them neatly beside the laptop. She looked at the dining table for a moment.
the same table she had sat at every midnight for 8 months, alone in the dark, working while the house slept around her. She walked to the kitchen to make tea, for both of them this time. And as the kettle heated and the night settled around the apartment and the children slept their deep, unbothered sleep in the next room, something became clear. The kind of clear that comes after a storm has passed and the air is finally clean again. A woman who knows her own worth does not need anyone to assign it to her. And a man who finally learned to see the person standing beside him really see her, not the version of her that is convenient for him, that man has been given a second chance that not every man is wise enough to take. The question now was what they would both do with it. Thank you so much for watching. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And please like this video and subscribe. New stories drop every week, and trust me, you do not want to miss what is coming next.